Come in. Come in. Oh, good to see you. Have a seat. But you come on an auspicious day, one of the great days, really, because it's April the 23rd, which is a double celebration. It's Shakespeare's birthday. It's also the day he died, interestingly. And by a happy chance, it's also St George's Day. St George being the patron saint of England. Previously, it was St Edmund, but in the High Middle Ages, it became St George. It was an association from the Crusades. In fact, St George was a Palestinian Christian saint originally, but of course, we have the great fable of his fighting the dragon. So I've always liked the story of George and the dragon. Anyway, I thought, because it was always a day to read Shakespeare, I had out the old my replicas, heavy piece of the first folio, and I thought it'd be fun. I should know it almost by heart, but it's actually a wonderful thing to read as well. To combine the Shakespeare and the celebration of England on the day of our patron saint by reading you the famous passage from it's from Richard II, when John of Gaunt, the second act of Richard II, suddenly produces this extraordinary encomium of praise of England, which has become justly celebrated. Although the context, he's actually saying, alas, that England has fallen so low. Alas, that, he says later out, it's like to a tenement or pelting farm, England bound in by the triumphant seas is now bound in with shame and inky parchments and blots. It's sort of about the English not living up to who they should really be, which, alas, does happen every so often. But if you love your country, you love it when it's down as well as when it's up. So I'll just read you this. We'll take it at its best beginning. It's a series of epithets, a series of titles, if you like, almost heraldic titles of what England is. This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden, demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection and the hand of war. This happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall or moat defensive against the envy of less happier lands. This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England, this nurse, this teeming womb of royal kings, feared by their breed and famous for their birth, renowned for their deeds as far from home for Christian service and true chivalry. It's wonderful. I love the way it moves from this sort of, it's almost as though you could have imagined, an aerial view, this precious stone, set in the sapphire sea. But then, it's this little world, this plot, this land. It's wonderful. This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England. I tend to find that what I love, in my own country, certainly, it's generally not the politics. It's not all the faded imperial claims. It's the particularity and continuity and peculiarity of places. It's this plot, this field, this lane, this parish church. That's really what I love. I love the fact that, the place I'm worshipped in on Sunday, people have been gathering there for 900 years in the same spot. And anyway, St George is commemorated, of course, in lots of pub names, but also church names. An interesting thing happened many years ago now. A friend of mine was the church warden of a really tiny little parish church called St George's in a village not far from Cambridge called Hatley St George. It's called Hatley St George because this tiny place, Hatley, had this little church, which is just a beautiful church, but it suffered a peculiar loss, which then in a curious way turned out to be, again, it was a medieval church, but the choir and sanctuary, the most easterly bit of the church, was being undermined by the roots of several trees, including one sort of great beech tree. And of course, the church was falling into disrepair and people could hardly afford to raise the money to, set the roof beams. And then one particularly violent storm, I think maybe one of the trees fell, whether the other one stands. But anyway, the sanctuary and choir fell into ruins, and they decided that they couldn't rebuild it, so they cleared it away and they left an open space where once, the altar and everything had been, and they built a new east wall. So the church is shorter than it should have been, and what was once enclosed is now open. And they put in, a window, as you would, the great east window. But in fact, what remained as you looked across the empty sanctuary and choir was this absolutely magnificent beech tree, just the most beautiful tree. And so when they did these repairs in the 60s, they decided just to put in plain glass so that you could look out. The light would come in the morning through the east window and you could see this magnificent tree. So anyway, this lady who was the church warden and knew I was a poet asked me if I would write a poem about this church, which they could then have up in the church and they could sell specially printed copies of, on the church's festival day, which is of course St George's Day. And I would have me come and do readings every so often, and I did all of that. But in order to do it, of course, I spent some time in the church. I spent a little time just, being still on my own in this beautiful church. And that's what led to the poem. And I think of this as my St George's Day poem, because although it's not about England as a whole, the church I describe here, dedicated to St George as the country is, could be any one of a number of beautiful parish churches. And it's about my love of the place being its particularities and continuities. So I thought you might like to hear this. I don't often read you my own poems. It's from my collection, The Singing Bowl, and it's just called Hatley St George. And one of the people at the congregation, a sixth form girl towards the end of high school who liked calligraphy, wrote the whole poem out really beautifully in calligraphy, which is hanging on the wall of that church now. So I hope that occasionally strangers who come in to the church just to look at it, whatever their faith or lack of it, might read these words and get a sense of the place and a sense of the stillness, and even perhaps be drawn into prayer. So that's how the poem ends. So here it is, Hatley St George. Stand here a while and drink the silence in, where clear glass lets in living light to touch and bless your eyes. A beech's tender green shimmers beyond the window's lucid arch. You look across an absent sanctuary, no walls or roof, just holy open space, leading your gaze out to the fresh-leaved beech God planted here before you first drew breath. Stand here a while and drink the silence in. You cannot stand as long and still as these, this ancient beech and still more ancient church. So let them stand as they have stood for you. Let them disclose their gifts of time and place, a secret kept for you through all these years. Open your eyes. This empty church is full, thronging with life and light your eyes have missed. Stand here a while and drink the silence in. Shields of forgotten chivalry and rolls of honour for the young men gunned at Ypres and other monuments of our brief lives stand for the presence here of saints and souls who stood where you stand to be blessed like you. clouds of witness to unclouded light, shining this moment in this place for you. Stand here a while and drink their silence in. Annealed in glass, the 12 apostles stand, and each of them is keeping faith for you. This roof is held aloft to give you space by graceful angels praying night and day, that you might hear some rumour of their flight, that you might feel the flicker of a wing, and let your heart fly free at last in prayer. So that's my little poem. Hatley St George, a pleasure to read it with you and to you on St George's Day. So here's to St George himself.